Welcome back to Crime Scene 24/7. To our returning subscribers, thank you for always engaging. Your likes, comments, and shares keeps us motivated. And if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our chilling crime scenes. Here, we dig deep, we investigate hard, and we bring you stories the mainstream left unsaid. So encourage us by engaging in our videos. Subscribe if you haven't, like, comment, and share. She was 7 years old, strapped into a stroller and left alone in the dark. At an apartment in DeKalb County, Georgia, no one heard her cries, until the day the smell led police to the door. What they found inside the closet would haunt investigators forever. The young girl's body was mummified, hidden from the world for months. Her mother admitted the child had been locked away because life was too much. In that moment, the question became unavoidable. How could a child vanish so completely under one roof? And what detectives discovered in her mother's record, and the holes in the system that let it happen, shocked even seasoned officers. June 25th, 2023. At a modest apartment on Misty Waters Drive in unincorporated DeKalb County, Georgia, something unimaginable was discovered. A 911 call reported a child's body inside one of the units. When officers entered, they found 7-year-old Alivia Jordan, special needs, autistic with seizures related to cerebral palsy, still strapped into her stroller, hidden inside a bedroom closet of the vacant home. Her mother, Alondra Hobbs, had moved out months earlier, abandoning the apartment, leaving Alivia behind. According to the district attorney, Hobbs admitted she placed the girl in the closet and walked away, stating life had become too much. The discovery shook the Atlanta area community, not simply for the horror of a child's death, but for the questions it raised. How could a bright little girl be hidden away so completely, strapped in a stroller in a closet for months with no one noticing? How many doors were open that should have been shut? As authorities processed the scene, families, social workers, and neighbors asked the same question. Was this tragedy preventable? Could someone have intervened? Could the systems designed to protect children have failed her when she needed them most? And so the investigation would begin, not just into how Alivia died, but why. What signs were missed? What warnings unheeded? The truth, it seemed, lay buried in the silent corners of that apartment, and in the shadows of a society that hoped it would never happen. She was 7 years old, a little girl born into a world that should have protected her. Alivia Jordan lived in Decatur, Georgia, in the unincorporated area of DeKalb County. She had autism, she had seizures because of cerebral palsy, and yet to those who knew her, she was a spark of light. They said she loved to greet everyone with her favorite phrase, "Hey, y'all." They said her smile could brighten a room. They said she carried a toy in her hand, always ready to give it away with a laugh. Her mother, Alondra Hobbs, told authorities that life had become too much. According to the district attorney, Hobbs admitted placing her daughter in a stroller, rolling her into a bedroom closet at the apartment complex on Misty Waters Drive, then leaving. She said Alivia was alive when she left. The apartment stood abandoned for months. When officers arrived on June 25th, 2023, they found Alivia still strapped in that stroller, her body mummified. To the world, she was just a little girl with medical challenges. To her family, she was our Alivia, a daughter who asked for cookies and giggled at cartoons, a child who trusted the adults around her to keep her safe. And yet the trust was broken. The news broke like a wave across Georgia. Reporters described the scene with words too harsh to dwell on. District Attorney Sherry Boston stated, Alivia Jordan did not deserve the slow, painful, and lonely death she suffered at the hands of her mother. At memorial services, friends and neighbors gathered to remember Alivia as she truly was. Lively, innocent, full of promise. Candles glowed under the Georgia sky. Photos of her at age 5 in a pink dress, arms outstretched, haunted the gathering. Teachers at her school recalled the day she failed to show up. She wasn't absent because of a seizure. She was absent because life had ended. One teacher whispered, "We didn't just lose a student. We lost someone we knew." Meanwhile, investigators were already at work. They weren't just searching for answers about how she died. They were searching for how she disappeared from life without anyone noticing. How could a child be left behind in a closet? How could no one check in? How could no one hear her? For the community, the wound was deep. A small child, vulnerable, entrusted to adults, and the system failed. Families held vigils near the apartment complex. One neighbor spoke softly. "We should have seen her." Another held back tears. "I asked for help once, but I never got it." And while the community mourned, detectives uncovered disturbing pieces of the puzzle. The stroller still in the closet, the empty apartment, the absence of any food or water records, the medical files showing Alivia's disabilities, the mother's admission of abandonment, the date of death estimated months earlier. But the story wasn't over, because while families mourned, detectives uncovered chilling traces of what led to this day, and the answers would shake Decatur far beyond its walls. The apartment was quiet when detectives entered. No light seeped through the blinds. Dust floated in the air, hanging thick like the silence itself. The air was stale, unmoving, heavy, the kind that clings to your throat and whispers of what's been forgotten. They stepped carefully across the floor, their shoes echoing against cracked tiles. Empty soda cans and torn wrappers lay scattered around, relics of a life that once tried to exist here. A small shoe sat by the door, pink, with faded sparkles, waiting for feet that would never wear it again. The smell was the first thing that spoke. It crept from the back of the hallway, sour, haunting, and unmistakable. Every seasoned investigator knew that scent. It was the smell of death, and it pulled them toward the closet at the end of the corridor. The closet door was shut, but the air leaking through its edges was thick with decay. One detective, a woman who had seen her share of scenes, paused before reaching for the handle. She closed her eyes for a moment, bracing herself, whispering what sounded like a silent prayer. Then she turned the knob. Inside, time had stopped. There she was, Alivia Jordan, still in her stroller, as if frozen in place. The tiny body, mummified from months of abandonment, sat upright. Around her, a blanket hung loosely, stiff with age. The straps of the stroller still crossed her chest, as though someone had once buckled her in for safety. A safety that never came. The detectives didn't speak. Some scenes demand silence, and this was one of them. The room itself felt sacred, like a church of grief and disbelief. The walls bore faint scribbles, drawings of clouds, stick figures, a sun with rays, evidence of a child who once lived here, who once played, who once believed in warmth and care. The coroner arrived. Cameras flashed. Notes were taken. But every photo, every detail, every mark, they all pointed to one unbearable truth. This wasn't a murder in the moment. This was a death stretched across time. A death of neglect. On the dresser, investigators found traces of Alivia's medications. Bottles for seizures and muscle spasms, still half full. They found a worn teddy bear missing one eye. They found a calendar from the year before, its pages untouched after May, and taped to the wall, a child's drawing of a house with two smiling faces, one small, one tall. The case became more than evidence. It became emotion. Officers struggled to process what they had seen. Some left the scene in tears. Others stayed behind, documenting every inch, determined that Alivia's story would not be lost in silence. One detective later told a reporter, "I've been to hundreds of crime scenes, but this one will never leave me. You could feel the loneliness in that room. You could feel her waiting." Outside, the neighborhood gathered as police tape sealed off the area. Neighbors whispered, trying to piece together what had gone unseen. A woman from the next building said she hadn't heard a sound in months. Another admitted she'd thought the family had moved out. Reporters arrived. Cameras rolled. The world was finally seeing what had been hidden in darkness. A little girl whose cries had faded long before anyone came to listen. But as investigators searched deeper, they found something else. Evidence that Alivia's mother, Alondra, had left the apartment long before the discovery. She had moved to another part of Georgia, living with relatives, telling them she'd handled everything. The search led to her arrest. The silence of the closet was replaced with the sound of police sirens. And in that moment, justice began to stir. Slow, deliberate, but unstoppable. Yet justice could never bring back what had been lost. Not the laughter, not the innocence, not the chance for Alivia to grow up, to heal, to speak her favorite words again. The crime scene was sealed. The stroller was taken as evidence, and as officers left the apartment one last time, one of them paused at the doorway, turning to look back. He whispered, barely audible, "Rest now, little one. We found you." The investigation into the death of 7-year-old Alivia Jordan began with a single question. How could a child vanish inside her own home for months and without anyone noticing? Detectives from the Henry County Police Department spent days combing through every corner of that small apartment. Each photo, each discarded item was a thread in a story that seemed almost too cruel to be real. But the evidence didn't lie. It spoke. And it spoke of abandonment, neglect, and a silence that lasted too long. Forensics technicians worked carefully in full protective gear. They noted the state of the stroller, the temperature inside the apartment, the level of decay, every detail that could tell them when Alivia had taken her final breath. The results were chilling. The medical examiner determined she had been dead for several months before anyone found her. As the coroner's report came in, the story began to unravel. Alivia's mother, 29-year-old Alondra Jordan, had told relatives that her daughter was being cared for by the state, a lie that would soon crumble under the weight of truth. When officers tracked Alondra down in a different part of Georgia, she seemed calm, almost detached. Her statements were inconsistent. She claimed she didn't know how things had gotten so bad. But when pressed about when she had last seen Alivia alive, her answers faltered. Investigators pieced together a timeline. Neighbors recalled the family living in the apartment until sometime in early 2023. One resident remembered hearing the child cry, often at night. Then, one day, the sound stopped. The window blinds were drawn. The apartment door was never opened again. Detectives checked Alondra's digital trail, her social media, her texts, her calls. They found selfies, online shopping receipts, messages to friends, even a few posts about moving on. But what they didn't find was any trace of her child. Not a mention. Not a photo. Not a single birthday post for months. The evidence painted a picture no parent should ever fit into. A mother living a new life while her daughter's body sat undiscovered in the shadows of a closet. The FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation were brought in to assist. They analyzed phone pings, tracked Alondra's movements, and compared them to the estimated time of death. It all led to one conclusion. She had left her daughter behind and never returned. When detectives confronted her with the findings, she broke down briefly, then grew quiet. She whispered that she didn't know what else to do, that she felt trapped. But those words only deepened the horror. Trapped, while her daughter starved, alone in a stroller. The police interviews were heartbreaking. In one recording, a detective asked, "Did you ever think about calling for help?" Alondra's voice, barely audible, answered, "I didn't think anyone would understand." Investigators reached out to family members, and their reactions were filled with disbelief. One relative said she thought Alivia was with her grandparents. Another said Alondra told them the girl was in a special care home. Lies, each one designed to push the truth a little further into the dark. Meanwhile, social services records showed no request for help, no sign of child protection involvement, nothing. It was as if Alivia had simply disappeared from every system meant to protect her. Police called the case the most haunting discovery in years. The Henry County Police Chief held a press conference, his voice breaking slightly as he said, "This is one of those cases that leaves a scar on your heart. No officer should have to see what we saw." As media outlets across the nation picked up the story, the public demanded answers. How could this happen in a world filled with cameras, neighbors, and community watch programs? How could a child vanish without a single alarm raised? For detectives, those questions fueled every step. They searched phone records again. They retraced Alondra's final days in the apartment. They even pulled footage from nearby surveillance cameras, hoping to find out when she left for the last time. Eventually, one timestamp stood out. A camera captured Alondra leaving the building carrying 2 bags, locking the door behind her. That was the day the clock stopped ticking for Alivia. Investigators believed that moment marked the end, the point where a young life was left in silence and a mother walked away. In the end, Alondra Jordan was charged with felony murder, second-degree cruelty to children, and concealing a death. She was denied bond and booked into the Henry County Jail. But for the investigators who worked the case, it wasn't about the arrest. It was about the girl they found, a 7-year-old whose story had been buried in the dark until someone finally opened the door. And even as the legal process began, one question haunted everyone who touched this case. How many other doors, in other neighborhoods, in other cities, are still closed, hiding stories just like Alivia's? The suspect's name is Alondra Hobbs, 29 years old when she pleaded guilty on April 23, 2025 in DeKalb County, Georgia, to the murder of her daughter. To the neighbors on Misty Waters Drive in unincorporated Decatur, her home had been quiet. She lived in the Hidden Valley apartments with Alivia until the summer of 2023. After that, the apartment stood silent. The stroller remained in one room, the curtains drawn tight, the front door locked. Alivia had been 7 years old at the time of her death. She suffered from autism and seizures tied to cerebral palsy. Her medical records confirmed it. Hobbs told investigators she placed Alivia in a closet in early 2023. The apartment was essentially abandoned soon afterward. On June 25, 2023, a 911 call reported a child's body inside a closet. The responding officers found Alivia mummified, strapped in a stroller. In interviews, Hobbs admitted her daughter had been alive when she left, and that she walked away because life had become too much. Investigators reconstructed her background: early parenthood, medical expenses, social isolation. She had fewer support systems than she admitted. Neighbors described her as polite but distant, someone who rarely invited company. Teachers from Alivia's early childhood program recalled Hobbs seemed overwhelmed at times. Hobbs' digital footprint offered clues. Social media posts vanished after May 2023. Messages to relatives stopped. A family member later testified she thought Alivia was in a residential care home. The truth, the authorities found, was far darker. While school records showed Alivia enrolled and attending early in life, the months after Hobbs moved out showed no remote learning login, no therapy appointments, no teacher check-in. The foster and care system had no active case. The child simply disappeared from every system designed to monitor her safety. Prosecutors painted a picture of neglect, abandonment, and calculated deception. Alivia Jordan did not deserve the slow, painful, and lonely death she suffered at the hands of her mother, said District Attorney Sherry Boston at the guilty plea. Friends who once saw Hobbs at school drop-off spoke of her sometimes carrying a duffel bag, often looking tired. One said, "She always said she was handling things, and then one day she wasn't." In court on April 23, 2025, Hobbs pleaded guilty to 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children, and was immediately sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The community breathed a collective sigh of relief, but questions remained. Hobbs was the suspect. The evidence was overwhelming. And yet, the deeper investigators dug, the more they uncovered the absence of intervention. School records, social services logs, medical visits, none show any follow-up after early 2023. The stroller strapped Alivia in the closet became a symbol of the system's failure. So the question echoed: was Alondra Hobbs simply a broken mother overwhelmed by life's pressures? Or was this one more case where a vulnerable child slipped through every safety net? But was this mother acting alone? Or did someone else intervene or fail her? And if so, why did no one stop it? When the courtroom doors opened on April 23, 2025, the silence inside was heavy. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished floors of the DeKalb County Superior Court, and at the center of it all stood Alondra Hobbs, her hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. She wore a plain beige jumpsuit, No jewelry, no tears, just the quiet breathing of a woman facing the weight of her own decisions. Reporters filled the benches, their pens poised. Family members of little Alivia Jordan sat in the first row, some clutching photographs of the smiling 7-year-old with her bright pink hair ties, the same girl who once laughed during speech therapy sessions and reached out for every hug she could get. The district attorney, Sherry Boston, rose from her seat, her voice steady but breaking through the room. Alivia Jordan did not deserve to die this way. She deserved care. She deserved love. She deserved to be protected. The prosecutors described in vivid detail the scene that police found on June 25, 2023. A child's body, mummified in a closet, strapped inside a stroller, left alone for months. They presented forensic evidence, photographs, DNA confirmation, and timeline analyses showing that Alivia's death likely occurred several months before discovery. The medical examiner's report confirmed extreme neglect and prolonged starvation. As the judge listened, the room shifted between quiet sobs and uneasy silence. The defense attorney did not dispute the facts. Instead, she spoke softly about mental collapse, untreated depression, and isolation. She painted Hobbs as a mother who lost grip on reality after years of single parenthood and financial struggle, but the state had already drawn its line. No amount of hardship, said Boston, can explain walking away and letting your child die alone. On the prosecution table, enlarged photos of Alivia's schoolwork and her favorite doll sat side by side with crime scene images, a contrast that pierced the heart of every juror and spectator. The judge's gavel fell only once. Hobbs had entered a guilty plea to 2 counts of malice murder, 2 counts of felony murder, and 2 counts of first-degree cruelty to children. She was sentenced to life without parole, ending the need for a jury trial. Reporters outside captured the moment she was led away. She did not look up. No statement, no final words, only the shuffle of chains echoing down the hallway. Outside the courthouse, emotions collided. Some demanded accountability, not just from Hobbs, but from the system that failed Alivia. One woman held a sign that read, "Where were the caseworkers?" Another, a former teacher, told cameras, "We reported absences. We asked questions, but no one followed up." Online, the story ignited outrage. Hashtags like Justice for Alivia and Protect Every Child trended across X and Facebook. Users posted candle emojis and heartbroken comments under her photo. Within days, national news outlets picked it up. CNN, NBC, Fox 5 Atlanta, each headline carrying the same disbelief. Mother sentenced after mummified child found in closet. But amid the grief, there was also confusion. Why did no agency check on Alivia after her last doctor's appointment in early 2023? Why did school records show missed attendance with no follow-up? Why did the Department of Family Children Services have no active file when teachers had previously raised concerns? In community forums, parents demanded reform. Town halls were held in Decatur and Stone Mountain, where citizens asked for mandatory welfare checks for high-risk families. Local lawmakers promised to review oversight laws. Yet, in the same breath, conspiracy theories began to swirl. Dark corners of the internet claimed the story was staged or covered up. Those voices were quickly drowned out by the sheer heartbreak of a tragedy too real to deny. National advocates for children with special needs used Alivia's story as a rallying cry. They called for renewed funding for parental mental health programs and early intervention case monitoring. Still, the image that remained wasn't of the protests or politics. It was that stroller, still sealed inside a crime scene photograph, symbolizing a child who waited for help that never came. The judge's final words were brief. "This court cannot restore what was lost, but we can ensure that Alivia Jordan's name will not vanish into silence." As the courtroom emptied, reporters whispered about how quickly the case concluded. Less than 2 years from discovery to sentencing, unusually fast for a murder conviction. The speed spoke to the overwhelming evidence and to a community's need for closure. But for many watching at home, it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a mirror, a reminder of how easily a vulnerable life can disappear unnoticed. And just when the community began to heal, investigators made a quiet announcement, one that suggested the story of Alondra Hobbs might not have ended with her sentence. Weeks after Alondra Hobbs was sentenced, the cameras faded and the courtroom emptied. The story should have ended there. Another tragic case closed in the files of the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. But then, something unexpected happened. On May 12, 2025, investigative reporters from WSB-TV Atlanta obtained documents through a public records request. Internal communications between local law enforcement and Georgia's Division of Family Children Services, DFCS. What they found reignited public outrage. The emails revealed that warnings about Alondra Hobbs had been raised months before Alivia's death. A school social worker had flagged chronic absence and visible neglect in late 2022. Notes indicated repeated calls to DFCS, but no home visit ever took place. In one haunting line, a caseworker wrote, "Attempted contact, no response, case closed." That single sentence, buried in a report no one read in time, reopened the wound for an entire community. The DeKalb County Police Department confirmed they were reviewing procedural lapses, but it didn't stop there. The FBI's Child Exploitation and Crimes Against Children Unit reportedly requested all digital communications tied to the case. Investigators wanted to know if anyone beyond Hobbs had been aware of the child's condition or her disappearance. What they discovered next changed the narrative once again. Through forensic analysis of Hobbs's cell phone, authorities uncovered a series of text messages and online searches made in the months before Alivia's death. Some were mundane, grocery lists, weather updates, but others were deeply disturbing. Searches about how to move out quietly, child custody escape, and can a child survive without food? In several of the texts, Hobbs messaged a contact listed only as J, an individual police have never publicly identified. The exchanges stopped abruptly around February 2023, just before investigators believe Alivia died. One of those messages read simply, "She's too much. I can't do this anymore." Detectives traced the number, but the user had deleted their account. Whether Jay was a friend, a relative, or an online acquaintance remains unclear. Law enforcement has never confirmed if that person was questioned. The revelation raised painful questions. Had Hobbs reached out for help, or had someone, perhaps even unknowingly, encouraged her descent into detachment and despair? Meanwhile, in a shocking update, the Georgia Office of the Inspector General opened a parallel investigation into DFCS's handling of prior reports. Internal memos later revealed that 3 caseworkers were placed on administrative leave pending review for procedural neglect. Public response was immediate. Thousands signed petitions calling for Alivia's Law, a proposal that would mandate follow-up home visits after 2 consecutive unverified reports involving minors. Advocacy groups said the tragedy exposed a gap in child welfare systems nationwide. Across America, talk shows and podcasts dissected the timeline, how a young mother slipped through the cracks, how mental illness intertwined with bureaucracy, how a child's silent suffering went unnoticed. One viral clip from a local vigil captured the emotional heartbeat of the story. A community member said softly into the microphone, "It wasn't just one person who failed her, it was all of us. Every call that wasn't answered, every check that wasn't done." As the sun set behind the flickering candles, the camera panned across rows of posters bearing Alivia's smile. The crowd stood in silence, their faces lit by cell phone lights, each one reflecting both grief and guilt. The investigation's findings were released weeks later. Officially, DFCS was cited for failure to follow policy but not criminal negligence. The state pledged reforms, promising stricter oversight. Yet, online, many didn't accept that as closure. Social media threads questioned whether the unknown contact, Jay, might still hold answers. Others speculated if the missed home visit could have been the difference between life and death. But perhaps the most haunting part came from Hobbs herself. During a psychiatric evaluation conducted before sentencing, she told doctors, "I thought someone would come. I thought someone would check." Those 8 words became the echo that outlived the trial, the protests, and the headlines. The DeKalb County Sheriff's Office later confirmed that Hobbs remains in Pulaski State Prison under suicide watch and counseling supervision. Meanwhile, in Decatur, a small mural was painted outside Snapfinger Road Elementary, where Alivia once attended preschool. It shows her smiling in a field of yellow, her favorite color, with the words, "You were seen, you are remembered." But even after the case closed, one unanswered question remained. Who was the mysterious Jay? And could the same digital trail lead investigators to another tragedy waiting to happen? The story of Alivia Jordan echoes far beyond one quiet apartment in Decatur. A 7-year-old girl living with autism and cerebral palsy, whose laughter once filled the halls of her preschool, found mummified in a closet, strapped to a stroller, her body hidden from the world. What stands out most is not just the horror of her death, but the silence that led to it. The missing welfare visits, the unanswered calls, the school absences without follow-up. The social worker's note, attempted contact, no response, case closed. In the months that followed, state authorities pledged reform. New bills were introduced in the Georgia House to require active home visits when a child misses therapy or school multiple times. Watchdog groups used Alivia's name as a rallying cry. Never again. District Attorney Sherry Boston said at sentencing, "We cannot restore what was lost, but we can ensure her voice remains alive in every child protection effort from now on." Nationwide, the tragedy sparked change. School attendance systems were upgraded. Child welfare agencies adopted digital dashboards to flag high-risk cases. Yet for the families who loved Alivia, these changes offer solace, but not release. They ask a question no reform can answer. What life might she have had? As the sun sets over the mural painted in her honor outside Snapfinger Road Elementary, yellow daisies and her smiling face spray-painted across brick, the message reads, "You were seen, you are remembered." And the question lingers long after the cameras turn off. Was this tragedy the act of one overwhelmed mother, or the symptom of something much larger? Before we end tonight's investigation, I want to hear what you think. Do you believe Alivia's mother acted entirely on her own? Or was this the heartbreaking result of a system that failed her at every turn? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment, and your voice helps keep these stories alive. And if you believe every victim deserves to be heard, every case deserves the truth, then hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications. And because here at Crime Scene 24/7, the truth never sleeps. I'm your host, and this is where every case finds a voice.